Hello, everyone. It is Friday, July 6th. This is the Kops office hours. We have a fairly light agenda, but let's get going on it. I think the main thing that's I'm sure on everyone's mind is moving forwards with releases of 110, and then also starting the 111 release, which we've talked about in the past as being, wanting to roll that out faster into alpha at least. I'm thinking once we get 110 into beta, then I'll probably do 111 into alpha at the same time. And we'll hopefully not have to put too many more fixes into 110 beta, and features will start rolling into 111, the 111 train instead. The big important thing for that to happen, though, is that we have to make sure that the 110 release is looking good, and we don't have too many features that we're going to have to backport. There are a couple of issues in the GitHub issues, which I'm definitely going to go through. But if anyone else knows of any other bigger issues other than the ones already on the agenda, then please do either put them on the agenda or mention them now. That would be great. Otherwise, I'll probably do the beta. I have some extra stuff happening. So I'll probably do the beta in the middle of next week. So probably around Wednesday of next week. And then we can, hopefully do a release within a week or two of that. And we'll do the 111 alpha around then as well. Well, that's the plan. Cool. All right, moving on. Fred, are you here? I thought, yep, you are. Or Fred, are you here? The 110 alpha 1 heptio authenticator works, but the daemon set YAML needs updates. Maybe you're not here. All right, well, Raphael, we know you're here. Why don't we do your one next? So feedback wanted on the ACM.
Yeah, I mean, it's really quick. I don't have much to say. I just opened this PR, which so I opened it this morning. It's 6 p.m. here. So it just implements a super simple hacky support for certificate. In this case, I only aimed the ACM certificate for the API load balancer. I created a cluster with that, and surprise, surprise, it works. But I'm totally not familiar with the Kops code base, so I just had a look at it and started hacking around. So I'm just looking for feedback. Not only that, and I thought it's the right place to actually ask for feedback. And essentially what it does, especially regarding testing, and what it does is nothing special. It just uses that certificate for the ELB in front of the API server, which means that you don't need the CA anymore into the config file. Why do I want that? Easy peasy. I just don't want to ship everybody the kubeconfig. I just want to tell, that's the URL. You can talk with it and you can trust it because ACM certificate is also free in AWS. So that's great.
That sounds great. And so currently you specify the ARA.
Yeah, I didn't know exactly how to do it. So I just put a flag to the argument to the CLI. Maybe there are better way, like putting in the YAML or something. And it just passed the ARN, and that's it essentially. And I do it a cluster creation. I can probably edit, now that I think about it, I will edit the PR to add the comment to how to run this in case someone wants to check the PR and try it.
Yeah, I'll test it out in my dev environment today because I could actually use this.
Lovely.
A question, so the kubeconfig that results no longer needs the CA certificate, but I don't see in the PR that you removed the code to include the CA certificate?
There is a terrible if somewhere that says if I specify that, I will not include the CA certificate.
Okay, cool. I was worried there was a bug. I must have just missed it, so that's great. Okay.
But yeah, feel free to. I mean, maybe I didn't push the code, but I don't think so.
Oh, I think I see it now. Yes, I see it's in the create kube comment. Cool. I was actually yes, and that's perfect because that's great. I was actually just worried that we had there was a bug in the kubeconfig handling of certificates. So
yeah, the way why I'm asking is that there might be interactions on things that I don't see. And yeah, so whatever. any feedback is welcome. I don't need this super quick, but I think it's a great addition. So
I think it's a great addition. I think the good thing is because it's extra functionality that you have to opt into, there's not as much risk. So we can basically get this in without too much risk. The only thing that we might want to think about is, in future, maybe people want to automatically generate these things or something like that, and making sure that we have a syntax that allows for that. But I'll have a look at this PR and we can try to come up with something. If currently you have to specify an ARN, then that probably is going to be fine.
I was very surprised to try EKS and see that they also have the custom CA. Maybe they're using Kops and under the hood. I don't know. I was really surprised because I was like, okay, they're AWS. They have everything under control, right? So, anyways.
Well, we should get it into Kops anyway. Thank you for the PR. That looks great. I will have a look at it, and I think because it's additive, I don't think there's any reason not to get it into 110 if it looks good, but we'll see, I guess.
All right, thank you. I'll just add the opportunity just to spam something that is Kops, not related to Kops, and which is there's also PR for me to add support for ELB. I think that you Justin already reviewed some time ago. It's in core Kubernetes, which is to add a security group without having extra rules. And the whole idea is that to set a proper security group for ELB for services and not adding rules, because the current behavior is that you always have 0, 0, 0, 0, 0. And so if you really want to restrict stuff for service, it's not possible. So there is a PR. If someone is interested, I will post it in the chat.
Do that. I am 62774. It looks like it's the PR.
Could be.
I will make sure that at least has the AWS tags on it so it doesn't get lost, because otherwise it will definitely, this is going to get lost. So I will label it with AWS. I think that perfect. Awesome. Thank you. Next up on the agenda, we have, I don't know if Fred is here, has joined, but let's assume not and continue. Shane, you are suggesting we recommend 110.3 due to
greater than 110.3. So I upgraded my development clusters to with the Kops Alpha, and it used 110.3 by default. And several of the Helm charts I had installed were failing due to issues with the volume mounts that were fixed in 110.4. I upgraded to 110.5, and that's currently what I'm running without any issues.
So 110.4 at least, and probably we should just recommend the latest and greatest.
Yeah.
That's a good call. I'll put that on the list. We normally put it into, I'll have to see where we are in the alpha channel. We normally put it into the alpha channel, let it bake there. In theory, people test it. It definitely goes through some EDE tests and then promote it to the stable channel. This looks like it might be more of a blocker, given if Helm charts are actually breaking, then that is going to be.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember which one specifically broke, but I think the Grafana Helm chart that I had installed off of the standard repo was failing, and at least one or two others.
So sadly, not a very obscure one. Okay. Or greater. 110.4 or greater should be unstable. Okay. Fred.
Fred doesn't have anything. This is Rodrigo. I actually have something about the authenticator. We probably should rename it before we release it, since the SIGs have adopted it and it's no longer a FIO authenticator now.
It is now the AWS authenticator, correct?
Yes, correct.
If anyone wants to send that, then yes, it would be great to get that done. I'm trying to think whether, we haven't released it, have we?
No, we released the alpha, but that's the only thing that's had it, so
yeah,
I don't think it should be too big of an issue. I'll try to put in a PR this weekend to get that renamed.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm trying to think whether, yeah, so the authenticator would be called AWS instead of, and that makes sense.
There is there is full documentation on the authenticator or repo, how to use it with Kops, even though I always had a bug that some people have and some people don't have, which I have no clue why, which is essentially like I have to restart the API server after I apply the authenticator daemon set, because there is some TLS craziness going on, which fully don't grok. And to be honest, I just restarted the API server when that happened. but like a cluster creation, it always happened.
Okay, well, I'll try it out and see if I can reproduce, but yeah, thank you.
Yeah, when I created it, I just rolled over my cluster completely, so I never really saw any issues.
Okay. Yeah, I don't have any insight there. Possible issue with kube proxy. Unfortunately, no issue number. I don't know. That sounds pretty serious, but in the absence of any more information, I guess we leave it and see if Fred pops up. Let's see. Is there anything else anyone wants to talk about? Rohit, do you want to talk about your amazing authenticator, or yes, I guess authenticator. What would you call it? Node authenticator?
Hey, been a long time. Sorry, I've been on the Kops out of hours for quite a few months actually.
Well, it's good to have you back, and the PRs you're sending are wonderful. I don't know whether we should. Yeah, it's great. Do you want to tell people about it? And I don't know exactly where we've left it.
I can't even remember where we've left it. I think the last thing was a CC for Justin B.
Okay. Yes, this is about a better way of bringing up nodes, bootstrapping their kube config in a way that is, I'm always hesitant to say more secure, but it's likely to be more secure, should we say?
Yeah, so there was two different PRs. First one was introducing the ability to wait for a bootstrap token, but it didn't actually do anything. So it relied on some third-party process doing it. And the next one is a service which runs on the masters, which does the whole shebang for you.
And it includes cross-checking the IP against the AWS API to make sure that the instance, for example, is tagged as part of your cluster.
Yes, it does a bunch of checks. Most of it is actually taken from Vault. So actually, let me put a link on there. One sec. I'll link to the PR. Where is it? If I can find it.
But it is optional and opt-in at the moment, right? So I'm thinking we can get it in as a feature flagged feature, so that we make it very clear that we are not guaranteeing it, because there's still it's a fairly big change. It's a good change, I think, but it's a fairly, it's a sizable change.
Yeah, so it's gated behind a flag, and it's also gated behind another feature flag as well.
Okay.
So you have to make numerous changes to the cluster spec, and as well as turning on a feature flag.
All right. Well, that sounds very, very safe. That no one's accidentally going to fall into that by mistake. So I will see if we are able to get that into the beta. I think that would be great, because one of those things that the more eyes on it, the better, I think. And we definitely need node authentication or node bootstrapping. I don't know what we call it, but per node certificates. And we haven't been to date, and it would be great to get that in. And I think we've had reservations in the past about the model by which those node certificates are granted, and I think you've addressed those. So it'd be great to get those. Get it in.
There's also a question of whether or not it's going to overlap with the Machines API.
Correct. And I actually thought, my thought on this was that even in a Machines API world, the sort of, it might be that the code moves, right? But that the sort of the general handshake, we sort of still need a similar sort of handshake. We're trying to establish that the machine that we're talking to is who we think it is. So I can imagine that there's a lot of overlap in the code. I don't know. That's me waving my hands. Yeah. Your PR, by the way, is 5317. Oh, there it is. Yeah. Cool. All right. Is there anything else anyone would like to talk about, or are we? There's some good stuff on there, and yes, I think if we get 110 beta out with some of those fixes, with 110.4 or whatever the latest 110 is, and hopefully the node authenticator in feature flagged and AWS certificates on the API, I think we'll be in good shape.
One question: what do you want me to do with the rollout strategies? That's been there since God knows how long. I rebase every now and again.
Yeah, that one is the one which really does impact the Machines API. So that's really tricky. Yeah. I don't know what you want to do with it. Are you running that yourselves or?
Yeah.
Okay. It's also one where I think we could do part of it maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Shall we?
Originally, I was going to park it because once you mentioned the Machines API, I was like, oh, okay, well, that's going to take over from it. So what was the point?
Yeah, I feel like there's certainly a lot of the Machines API is not. I was expecting it to be more done by now, both on my side, both on the Kops side and on the Machines API side, and it's not quite there yet. So that's a little frustrating, I guess, from that point of view, and I apologize for that. I think the PR maybe tries to do some strategies which aren't safe, right? Or have interesting failure scenarios.
Oh yeah.
I was trying to think whether we could maybe find one which was safe, but then again, I don't really know if there's any real point given the Machines API coming and the Machines API effectively making those all safe by being able to track the state. So the problem that we face today is our only state store is the AWS API and our instance groups, our Kops API.
Yeah.
We don't have currently an object that represents so our instance group is like a deployment. We don't have replica sets, which are what track the state of a rollout and allow that to be safe in Kubernetes. That's what the Machines API is going to introduce. In order to make the rollout safe in today, we would have to sort of reinvent some way of storing the rollout state. And that's what I'm wondering if just isn't really worth it versus adopting the Machines API. But on the other hand, if I know it's a good feature and a lot of people want it, it needs a lot of work to keep it up, but I don't know. That's my challenge. What do you think?
I'm happy just to park it, to be honest with you, and just wait. It changes so much.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I haven't tested it for a long time, so.
If that's all right, then I think that would be great. And why don't we make a concerted effort to get some bit of the Machines API going once we have the 1.11 alpha out, then we can really see how far we are from the Machines API and all of that.
All right, cool.
Thank you. Sorry, and thank you.
It's cool. Don't worry about it.
Is there anything else?
Is that a Kops specific Machines API, or is there an official one? So
the Machines API itself is part of the cluster API and is a generic API across all of Kubernetes is the hope. It's a fairly open-ended API, so they have something like a deployment called I think they call it a machine deployment, a machine set, and a machine, which corresponds to deployment, replica set, and pod. And they're all pretty generic at the moment, and they each have a provider config block, which is sort of an extension block where you put your Kops configuration or your Kubernetes configuration or whatever it is. You can basically put whatever you want, stuff whatever you want in that generic wrapper object. And the hope is that the machine deployment logic, the rollout logic would be the same for all. So you'll have one controller, which will be specific to your cloud and the way you install. But then the logic that does the rolling update will be generic. So we could take Gamble's PR and make it a generic PR that would then work on any implementation of not even Kops, for example. So it would work on maybe GKE if GKE adopted the Machines API, or EKS if EKS adopted the Machines API, right? That same logic would work everywhere. And it wouldn't necessarily be at the cloud provider level, so it wouldn't necessarily be in auto-scaling groups. It would be at the machines level, tracked through the Kubernetes API. So that's nice, but that it's a Kubernetes API basically for managing. It's our first Kubernetes API for managing infrastructure that is part of the Kubernetes project. Maybe you'd argue that volumes is, but anyway, first one for managing machines certainly, and that is another subproject of SIG Cluster Lifecycle, and it's called Cluster API, and it meets on Wednesdays.
So where does the cloud provider part of that come into it?
So there is a machine. There's a machine object which is created, which is the analog of a pod, and then there is a machine controller which observes or watches those machines. And the job of the machine controller is to actuate or create a VM or a physical machine or whatever it is that actually will then register as a node. So the machine controller is how a machine eventually becomes a node. But the machine controller operates in terms of machines and doesn't necessarily have to be aware of machine sets or machine deployments and how they come about.
Okay. So like you wouldn't be using NodeUp anymore for that stuff?
So if we had a Kops machine controller, and we do have a Kops machine controller on some branches somewhere, they still use NodeUp. But it's an implementation detail of the machine controller. So you could have a machine controller that called out to Ansible, or you could have a machine controller that like did it all through Bash or SSH or whatever you wanted to, or you could have a machine controller that like brought up that ran NodeUp. And so the prototype we have is it brings up a machine and SSHs to it, and then SCPs some files to it, and SCPs NodeUp to it, and then runs NodeUp. So but it's almost, you could run kubeadm, you could run whatever you wanted to, or the machine controller can run whatever it wants to. The machine controller is basically responsible for getting a node to register with the sort of general configuration as specified by the machine. So a machine specifies, I think it's difficult to know what's actually in the core object and what's in the provider config, but the machine would specify the Kubernetes version for the kubelet, for example. It would specify the amount of memory and CPUs and whether you wanted a GPU, all that sort of stuff. So, or maybe just the instance type on AWS. It could specify the networking options, but that would definitely be getting into provider config. But the idea is that the machine controller then is the only thing that needs to know anything about the cloud, and that the rolling update logic or the sort of how you run machines is then abstracted away from, or can be implemented once and work across all cloud providers. And so we have something similar to this in Kops today, where we have, the rolling up. We don't write a different rolling update for GCE than we do for AWS, but we implement the same interface in terms of, I can't remember what we call them, cloud instance groups, I think what we called them. And so, but this is sort of taking that to a more Kubernetes level, so that you can actually split that logic out. We have interface abstraction in Kops, and you could actually split it into separate controllers in Kubernetes.
Okay. I got it. Thanks.
If there's nothing else, oh, Fred, hello. We weren't sure. We saw we had 2 items on the agenda from you. We skipped over them because you were not here. But we thought the Heptio Authenticator one might be about renaming to AWS Authenticator. Is that right?
The specific issue that I encountered with that one seemed to be it was a file system permission issue. So I had to use a security context that doesn't map your root user ID to something else or something like that. But I'd be happy to hear more about that, what you're talking about.
Oh, no, I mean, I think I think there was I saw the PR which changed from mod 600 to 644, and that looks good. I need to understand why we have to do that, but that makes sense as a problem that we have to solve, and it would be great not to have to make it world readable, but it's an acceptable fix, but I don't know if we can, do better, right? Or make it more tighter. We also know the Heptio Authenticator has also been accepted as a sub-project of SIG AWS. So we're going to, and as part of that is going to be renamed AWS Authenticator. And so because it's only been done as an alpha release so far, we're just going to rename it from, I guess, Authenticator equals Heptio to Authenticator equals AWS.
And that would have been my next question: is that going to be included in the the GA version of 1.10 Kops? Okay.
Yes, we cannot. It would be very tricky to rename it after we did GA, so now is the time.
Gotcha.
We talked about we're probably going to cut our beta next Wednesday. I have some personal stuff. I have some work stuff happening until then. So
great. So my next question is, what I missed? Just kidding. The other item I had, I'm not quite prepared, so I guess I'll bring it up on the next office hours.
This is the kube proxy issue?
Well, I don't know. Actually, maybe you guys can give me some guidance in the form of a link or a previous item, but between the AWS VPC ENI thing and something about the Kops cluster or something, we sometimes get pods that are unable to talk to the cluster VIP for API server. And I was hoping maybe you guys could give explain how we could go around like identifying which piece it is. It's most likely AWS's VPC CNI thing, I think, and it has something to do with when the second ENI gets attached or something to that effect. Something is busted on the source or destination, either the worker node or the master control plane node, or something is going on, and I haven't really been able to identify exactly what it is, other than the second ENI seems to play a role somehow.
And if you restart that pod, does it then recover?
That's one of the things I haven't been able to pin down. Is it always the same? Because eventually you can deploy something sometimes 2 or 3 times and it fixes itself. So I don't think it's a core Kubernetes thing. I think it's.
I know there's a limitation with that, with how many pods you can run per node, depending on the node type. So like there's a map that they have in the EKS node CloudFormation thing where when they set up the kubelets, they set the amount of pods based on the node type.
And a question for you guys on this one too. I was hoping with this kind of issue, rather than having to sort of look at all the IP tables entries in several places, that there would be some sort of error in either the IPAMD log or the CNI plugin log, or somebody would have an error in their log. But it seems like as far as the API server is concerned, when you describe the pods or whatever, there's no issues reported. And I couldn't find anything in any of the logs of any of the Kubernetes pieces or the CNI stuff, the couple processes that it adds on each node.
So I have a question. Are you sure it's only talking to the API server? Because the API server, I mean, what do you mean talking with the API server? Do you mean talking with the service IP of the API server? Because in this could be anything service IP related.
That's a good point. That's why I'm bringing it up, is I think it's possibly all cluster VIPs or all services or all cluster IPs are broken somehow when they go off node for some pods or something like that. I'm hoping maybe by the next time this comes around, I'll have more context and something. But I was hoping maybe you guys could give me something other, like a troubleshooting guide or something, so I could rule out, say, kube proxy or something as being the culprit. Like it's very most likely it's their.
Yeah, there is. So there is actually all right. So there is a service troubleshooting guide, and it will help you narrow down whether, for example, it is the like the VIP or DNS or internode networking. So like, if you try to reach the pod directly or the IP directly in the case of API server, then you know that it's not the VIP.
Yes, that would be perfect, because I'm trying to rule out which component it can be.
Exactly. Yeah. So we have this. I think it's pretty old, and I think it predates CNI. And I know that there's also another issue. Debug services. There's another issue, which is there's sort of a known race with CNI where in theory the node can come up before the CNI provider. So the node comes up and is schedulable, but the CNI provider might have to do something. and it might not have done something before the node is schedulable and starts to have pods run on it. And so normally that autocorrects, like, there's a time period where the pod can't reach stuff, depending on what your CNI provider is, but like it then recovers within a couple of seconds as the CNI provider comes in behind the scenes and fixes it up. But it's possible that the AWS VPC CNI behaves differently. I don't know. I'm just trying to find. Anyway, in any case, the link that I'm about to paste you, this one, I think is the one which basically goes through, like, does the service work by DNS, does the service work by IP, and then, like, are all those sort of steps. And that will really help you narrow it down to, hopefully, to like one thing. But I suspect that the VPC CNI is not setting up something in time, which isn't necessarily that CNI provider's fault, right? And then somehow the pod is getting into an odd state where the network mapping isn't working or something like that.
Okay, good point. And I do have a silly question in general. It seems like the cluster IPs or whatnot, like the service IPs, come from a setting in the cluster spec called non-masquerade CIDR block. It seems like they're assigned from there. I don't quite understand what that means as far as non-masquerade, because that's not an actual routable address range, right? And
correct. So the service block is a block of basically, we assign these virtual IPs. They basically have to be just unused elsewhere in the cluster because they're stolen from the address space and remapped. The nomenclature of it is a little weird. I don't think it's actually non-masquerades. It's a subset of non-masquerade CIDR block, I think, if I recall correctly. It's a subnet of that.
Yeah, you're right. But I was just kind of curious, because what seems strange to me about that one is obviously there's something in like some DNATing or something in IP tables that make it possible, because it gets delivered throughout the cluster. So okay.
Yes, and it's a sort of, the name made more sense originally before we had like CNI and all these sort of fancy other ways of doing things. And it used to be basically the set of the internal network, the IP addresses used inside the cluster, and they were therefore not doing IP masquerade for NAT on the way out, is sort of how I remember it. When you say like the AWS VPC CNI, then the pod IPs aren't masqueraded either. So now it's really a little confusing, maybe.
But by the way, we've been using the alpha, and this is the only problem that we've encountered with it. Other than the minor issue with the authenticator, but it seems to be pretty solid. So I am impressed. The alpha is very usable. So nice job, everyone.
Yeah, well done, everyone. It's a team effort, and thank you, everyone. But good. So hopefully we can get it released, and hopefully you can track that down. And yeah, I'm happy to know that it's likely related to the AWS VPC CNI provider, which is still a little earlier than other things. But yeah, certainly if you're able to track it down, do let us know what you find, because if it's more general, then that's obviously even more concerning.
Okay, and I think it is probably less than 5% an actual problem with Kops or the alpha branch or any of that stuff. All right, thanks, everybody.
Awesome. Thank you, Fred. All right, is there anything else, or should we enjoy our Fridays?
Oh, Justin, I have one more question.
Go for it.
I couldn't find any documentation within the project about some of the features for customize, or some of the hooks that Kops actually does support.
Okay, that one I thought you were going to say etcd manager, and I was like, yes, I have to do that. But
yeah, that one too. But I'm curious. am I just not finding it, or is it one of those things that's just not advertised too much?
I personally don't love people using it, but they are useful. Like I very much would rather people used like a daemon set if it's possible, but it should be documented. And I think we have, there's a top level directory called hooks, which has some examples. And then, and actually that's what's gone wrong. Docs hooks has disappeared. Where did it go? One of them has a link. It has a broken link, but I thought it was. Oh wait, the file's gone. Okay, that's what's gone wrong. All right, there used to be a file called hooks, and I don't know where it is.
Well, that's why I was kind of wondering if it was something you guys don't really want people to use for some reason, as in it's not too stable from version of Kops to Kops or something.
The big dilemma about them is that they tie you, I guess, to your OS image a lot more, and they're not really as integrated into Kubernetes as they're sort of invisible, right? They're sort of a Kops feature, and so if you can use a daemon set, a privileged daemon set which runs on all your nodes, and that works for you, then you can, see the output of them easily. You can easily upgrade them. It's easier to test. You can roll it out, all the niceties of Kubernetes. So if, and that's a big if, you're able to use a daemon set to do that, I personally think that's a nicer option. But a lot of people can't, and a lot of people have more advanced use cases that are harder to fit into the daemon set. And so that's why we have them. They are not supposed to be as hidden as they are. I don't know where they've gone, to be honest. And they are supposed to be documented, and I just don't understand where they've gone. I'm trying to search for like hook. I found a broken link, but I haven't found the actual hooks. If you look in the hooks top level directory, there are at least 2 examples which should demonstrate how to use them. Campbell, do you know where they are? Where the docs are?
Sorry. There's something in the cluster spec. I just sent the link on there.
Oh, perfect.
Thank you. All right, Jen. And as cover, I won't bother you with any more questions this time.
I just put an example as well in the authenticator documentation on how to use hooks in the cluster spec. So that's what I use. So that works.
Awesome.
Okay, fellas. I will definitely probably be back with my findings next time.
Awesome.
With more details about the cluster VIP issue.
And happy weekend to everyone.
Take care.